It was Christmas night, and Daniel Hunter was yelling at his wife, Isla, "I'm tired of looking at you. I made a mistake marrying you. You can't even give me a baby. And now I'm 38. I need someone who can give me a child to take care of my business. I'm divorcing you," he shouted, drunk. Ila didn't say anything. She quietly left the party, tears rolling down her cheeks. 16 years earlier, the Golden Crown pub was lit up with shiny chandeliers. The golden lights reflected on the rainy windows, making everything sparkle. It was a quiet Thursday evening in downtown California, and Isla Caldwell stood at the doorway of the pub. She was 18 and wore a neat silk blouse and black pants. Even though she was young, people couldn't help but notice her. "Come on, Isla," her friend Cleo Jenkins tugged on her arm, smiling. "You can't spend every night working on those farm reports. Your parents wouldn't want this for you." Cleo's words brought a deep sadness to Ila. It had only been 6 months since she lost her parents in an accident, leaving her in charge of their large farming business. Even though it was hard, she took on the responsibility with maturity beyond her years. "I have a meeting with the board tomorrow morning," Isla said softly, but Cleo wasn't letting her escape. She guided Isla to a cozy booth in the corner of the pub. This place was famous for being fancy, where rich people came to relax. Glasses clinked and expensive perfumes filled the air. It was nothing like the farms Isla was used to. "Just 1 hour, Isla. That's all I'm asking," Cleo said, Cleo waving at a waitress. Suddenly, some noise near the bar caught their attention. A group of men was laughing loudly around someone. Through the crowd, Isla saw glimpses of dark hair and a fancy suit. The man at the center seemed to shine. "That's Daniel Hunter," Cleo whispered with excitement. "You've heard of him, right? His family's furniture company is famous. The Bevon name is on all the fancy furniture rich people buy." Isla nodded. Of course, she'd heard of the Bevons. Her mother had bought their furniture for their house. But as she watched Daniel, she noticed something about him. He had an easy smile and looked confident, but his eyes seemed lonely. Their eyes met, and Isla felt a strange spark. "They say he's a playboy," Cleo continued, "but a smart businessman when he's sober. He started drinking after his father died." Daniel suddenly walked toward their table. The crowd made way for him as if he belonged everywhere he went. "Cleo," he greeted warmly, but his eyes were on Isla. Cleo smiled. "Daniel, this is my best friend, Isla Caldwell." Daniel looked at Isla for a moment. "Morrison as in Morrison Agricultural Enterprises?" he asked. "Yes," Isla replied, lifting her chin. "And you're Daniel Hunter, who seems to prefer drinking over running his father's company." Cleo gasped at her boldness, but Daniel laughed loudly. "You're honest and bold," he said, sliding into the booth. "Tell me, Miss Morrison, what brings you to a place like this?" "Someone like me?" Isla raised an eyebrow. Daniel smiled. "Someone who clearly doesn't like places like this, but whose eyes seem curious." Isla felt like the air between them was electric. They talked, and as the night went on, Isla began to see a different side of Daniel. He wasn't just a spoiled rich guy. He had pain and stories of his own. When midnight came, Isla stood up to leave. Daniel followed quickly. "Let me have your number," he asked, his voice serious. Cleo scribbled Isla's number on a napkin before Isla could say no. "Use it wisely," Cleo told Daniel with a smile. As Isla walked into the cold night, she felt Daniel's eyes on her. Something had changed that night, even though she didn't know it yet. The next morning, Isla's phone buzzed during her meeting. She saw an unknown number calling and ignored it. By the evening, she had 7 missed calls and 1 message. "One dinner. That's all I'm asking. Daniel." She deleted it. The next day, flowers arrived at her office. They were rare and beautiful orchids. The card read, "I haven't had a drink since Thursday night." Isla placed the flowers on her assistant's desk. "They're lovely. Who sent them?" her assistant asked. "A mistake," Isla replied, trying to ignore the flowers. For 2 weeks, Daniel kept sending flowers, notes, and little gifts. He even started showing up sober to meetings, surprising everyone. He's changing, Cleo told Isla one day. He's going to AA meetings. He's really trying. Finally, after 2 weeks, Isla picked up his call. Mr. Bavon, she said. You answered, Daniel said, sounding relieved. I'm not interested in being another girl in your life, Isla told him firmly. Good, Daniel replied. That's not what I want. Just one dinner. If you still don't want to see me after that, I'll leave you alone. After a long pause, Isla agreed. One dinner. That one dinner turned into 2, then 3. Daniel stayed sober and showed her the real him. He told her about his struggles and she shared her fears. Slowly, they grew closer. 6 months later, on a rainy night, Daniel kissed Isla for the first time. I love you, he whispered. Prove it, Isla said. Stay sober, not for me, but for yourself. I will, Daniel promised. 1 year after they first met, Daniel proposed to Isla at the Golden Crown pub, the place where it all began. The pub was empty, except for them. Daniel held out a golden ring with a diamond from his mother's collection. Marry me, he said with a smile. I want to spend my life proving that love can change someone if it's the right kind of love with the right person. Isla Caldwell, just 19 years old, said yes. She became Isla Bevon in a grand wedding that joined 2 of California's most important families. People called it a fairy tale, but for Isla and Daniel, it was more than that. It was a love story about second chances and never giving up. At their wedding reception, as they danced, Daniel whispered to Isla, every girl in the city might have liked me, but I only love you, always and forever. Isla looked up at her new husband and saw the same love and determination in his eyes that had won her heart. They had found each other, helped each other heal, and built a love strong enough to face anything. Or so they thought. They didn't know their love would soon face big challenges they couldn't imagine. For now, they danced, happy and in love, believing nothing could ever tear them apart. The morning sun peeked through the windows of the Bavon mansion, filling the house with soft golden light. Isla stood in the kitchen, dressed in a fancy burgundy suit, sipping tea while reading papers about their farm business. She smiled when she heard Daniel's footsteps. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. You're up early, she said, leaning back against him. Board meeting at 8, Daniel replied, kissing her head. We're ready to launch the new European project. Daniel wasn't the party-loving guy he used to be. Now he was a confident and successful businessman. He had stayed away from drinking and turned his father's furniture company into something even bigger and better. Their home was beautiful, sitting on a hill overlooking the ocean. Inside, the furniture was special, chosen by Isla herself. Their garden had unique plants from Ila's family farm, showing how their 2 lives had blended together. Guess what? Isla said, turning to Daniel. The new greenhouse project is ahead of schedule. We might start planting the crops next month instead of spring. Daniel's eyes lit up. Over the years, he had come to love farming as much as Isla loved furniture design. Together, they had built successful businesses. We should celebrate, he said. How about dinner at home tonight? I'll cook. Isla laughed. You'll try to cook, but we'll probably end up ordering from the Italian place on 5th. Hey, that was 1 time, Daniel protested, grinning. 3 times, Isla corrected, laughing. Their laughter filled the house, a happy sound that had become normal in their lives. Isla worked hard as the CEO of her family's farming business. At just 23, she had become a confident leader. On her desk were pictures that showed their happy life, her and Daniel at a charity event, their wedding day, and the time they started a new factory together. At the same time, Daniel was doing great with the furniture company. They had expanded to many countries and created jobs for lots of people. Like, every part of their lives was connected. On their 4th wedding anniversary, Daniel surprised Isla with a fancy dinner in their garden. The roses were blooming and tiny lights twinkled around them. Do you remember when we first met? Daniel asked, holding her hand. You told me you didn't want to be just another girl in my life. Isla smiled. You proved me wrong. You saved me, Daniel said softly. You taught me how to live with purpose. We saved each other, Isla said, her voice full of love. They had built a happy, successful life. Daniel stayed sober and even helped other people who struggled like he once did. Isla had grown into a confident woman, loved and admired. Their love was strong and their future looked bright. But sometimes cracks hide under the surface. Daniel's hands sometimes shook when he was stressed. At dinners, his eyes lingered a little too long on wine glasses, and there were whispers, quiet ones, about where Daniel went when no one was looking. One rainy night at exactly 10:47 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Isla was working in the sitting room when the butler, Thomas, opened the door. Two police officers stood there. Good evening, one said. We're here to talk to Mrs. Ela Bevan. Isla came to the door, calm but confused. We need to talk about your husband, Daniel, one officer said. He's not in Washington as you thought. We're investigating gambling activities, and Daniel owes dangerous people a lot of money, about $200 million. Isla froze. That's not possible, she said. Daniel hasn't gambled in years. The officers explained they had proof, videos showing Daniel gambling in secret. He had been losing huge amounts of money, putting their entire life at risk. After they left, Isla stood still, thinking about the life they had built. How much of it had been real? A week later, Daniel returned home late at night. He looked tired and defeated. Where have you been? Isla asked, standing in the foyer. $200 million? 6 months of lies? Daniel fell to his knees, crying. I love you, Isla. That's real. I just made a mistake. I thought I could fix it without you knowing. The police came, Isla said, her voice calm but cold. They say the people you owe money to won't wait. What's your plan, Daniel? Daniel looked desperate. We can sell your family's land. It's worth enough to pay them back. Isla's voice turned sharp. Sell my family's land? My parents worked their whole lives for that land. Daniel knelt on the floor, begging Isla. We can sell the land and buy it back later when I rebuild the furniture business. Your uncle would give us a fair price. $250 million will cover the debts and give us a chance to start fresh. Please, Isla, I don't know what else to do. Outside, thunder roared, like the sky was angry at what Daniel was asking. Isla looked at him, the man she loved, the man she trusted, the man who had broken every promise he ever made. If I do this, she said slowly, her voice heavy with meaning, you will never gamble again. You will go back to AA meetings. You will focus on fixing everything you've broken, and you will spend the rest of your life making this right. Anything, Daniel promised, reaching for her hands. I swear on my father's grave. But as Isla looked into his eyes, she felt a chill. Deep inside, she saw doubt, a shadow of the trouble that had brought them here. She knew in her heart that this might not be the last time Daniel's bad choices would test their love. Still, she decided to sell her family's land. The next morning, her uncle's lawyers prepared the papers. The land that had been in her family for generations would belong to someone else, and a part of Isla's soul would be gone. The money would pay off Daniel's debts and save the furniture business. But something had changed forever. The trust between Ela and Daniel was broken, and through the cracks, darkness began to creep into their lives. What Isla didn't know was that this was only the start of their struggles. The next morning, the sun shone over the Morrison family estate. Isla stood in her father's old office, a room filled with memories. She ran her fingers across the wooden desk where she had watched him work when she was a child. Outside the windows, she could see the fields her father had cared for his whole life. Now, it was all about to be sold. The papers are ready, Mrs. Bevan, said Mr. Harrison, her uncle's lawyer. He stood in the doorway holding a folder. Behind him was her uncle Richard, looking worried for Isla. Isla took a deep breath and nodded. She wore a cream blouse and a black suit that felt like armor. She needed it to protect her from the storm of emotions inside her. Outside, workers were busy, not knowing their world was about to change. $250 million, Uncle Richard said softly, standing by the window. It's more than the land is worth, Isla. I promise I'll take care of it. The workers will keep their jobs. Nothing will change except the name on the deed. But Isla knew everything would change. This land wasn't just dirt and plants. It was her family's legacy, their hard work, and their dreams. Daniel stood in the corner of the office, his face pale and full of shame. His fancy suit hung loosely on him, and his eyes were dark with guilt. He hadn't slept for days. Mr. Harrison placed the papers on the desk. They were thick with pages, each one holding a piece of Isla's heritage. The $250 million would pay $200 million to cover Daniel's gambling debts and leave $50 million to save the furniture business. You don't have to do this, Daniel whispered, his voice cracking. We can find another way. Isla turned to him, her voice steady but firm. There is no other way, and you know it. These people want their money now. We're out of time. She picked up the pen, her hand heavy with the weight of what she was about to do. She remembered her father signing papers here, making big decisions that affected so many lives. He had taught her that being a leader sometimes meant making hard choices. Uncle Richard looked at Daniel, his voice sharp. This land has been in our family for 4 generations. We've survived droughts, bad economies, and disasters, but we've never lost it. Not until now. Not until you. Daniel flinched but said nothing. He couldn't defend himself. His gambling had brought them to this point. Isla began to sign the papers. Each signature felt like a piece of her heart breaking. These fields were her playground as a child, her safe place, her future. Now they were just a deal on paper. Mr. Harrison explained, the first transfer will happen right away. The full amount will be available in a few hours. Everything has been rushed because of the emergency. Emergency. Such a simple word for the mess Daniel's gambling had created. Somewhere in the city, dangerous people were waiting for their money, growing more impatient by the second. When Isla signed the last paper, she felt like even the land knew it was being sold. Outside, dark clouds gathered and the sky seemed ready to cry. Uncle Richard hugged her tightly. Your parents would be proud of you, he said softly. Not for losing the land, but for your strength in such a hard time. Isla couldn't speak. She was afraid she might cry if she tried. Instead, she nodded and squeezed her uncle's hand. By the end of the day, Daniel's debts were paid, and the furniture business had a second chance. But the Morrison land, the heart of her family, was no longer theirs. That night, Isla stood alone in the garden. This was her mother's favorite place, filled with roses and herbs. Tomorrow, it would belong to someone else, even if that someone was family. I'm sorry, Daniel said, his voice coming from behind her. I know those words aren't enough, but I don't know what else to say. Isla didn't turn to look at him. Do you remember what you promised when we got married? That you'd never gamble again? That you'd make me proud? That our love would be enough? I remember, Daniel said, his voice shaking. Then tell me why, she said, finally facing him. Why wasn't our love enough to stop you from ruining everything? Daniel stepped closer, but Isla moved away. It started with one game, he admitted. A business friend invited me to a club. I thought I could handle it. I thought I was stronger now. But you weren't, Isla said softly. No, Daniel whispered. I lost. Then I tried to win it back, and I lost more. It got out of control so quickly. I kept thinking I could fix it before you found out. That one big win would make it all better. Isla looked out over the dark fields. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You didn't just lose money, Daniel. You lost my trust. You lost my father's legacy. You lost pieces of me I can never get back. I'll make it right, Daniel promised. I'll rebuild the business and buy back the land. I swear it. Isla knew the moment hadn't come yet. You're not yourself, she said softly, trying to calm Daniel. Let's talk in the morning when you're not drunk. But Daniel's voice rose, loud and angry. I'm more myself than I've been in years. he shouted, his words bouncing off the shiny floors. Do you know what people say about us? About you? The wife who can't have a baby to carry on the Bivun name? I've waited long enough. Isla's heart felt cold, like ice. Is that what this is about? She asked, her voice shaking. An heir for your precious name? Don't act like you don't know how important this is, Daniel said, his face red with anger and too much alcohol. My father's legacy, my family's future, it all ends with me because you can't do the one thing a wife is supposed to do. Isla moved before she even realized it. The loud slap echoed in the big hallway. Daniel stepped back, more shocked than hurt, his hand on his cheek. Isla, he began, but she cut him off, her voice sharp and strong. Enough. You want to talk about legacy? About family? You gambled away everything my family built without a second thought. You broke every promise you ever made to me, and now you dare to blame me? But Daniel wasn't listening. He was too angry, too drunk to hear the pain in her words. I'm tired of looking at you, he spat. I put up with this marriage, but you couldn't even give me a baby. Now I'm 38, and I need someone who can take care of my business in the future. You're barren. You can't be a mother. I'm divorcing you. The words hung in the air like poison, hurting Isla deeply. She didn't say anything back. She just turned and walked out of the mansion, tears running down her face. The December wind was freezing, but she didn't feel it. Behind her, she heard Daniel calling her name, his voice angry and regretful, but she didn't stop. Her car was waiting outside. She climbed in, her hands shaking as she held the keys. As she drove through the quiet streets of California, she placed one hand gently on her belly. She was carrying a secret now. A new life. No, 3 new lives. She had to protect them from the pain and anger Daniel had brought into their marriage. The next morning, Daniel would wake up from his drunken night to find divorce papers on his desk. A short note came with them. It said only 3 words, you never knew. What Daniel didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that the woman he had called barren was carrying his children, 3 little babies, and he wouldn't find out until fate decided it was time. Years later, Daniel would realize what he had lost that night. The big mansion would feel cold and empty, full of memories of what could have been. But for Isla, that Christmas night wasn't just the end of her marriage. It was a new beginning. She would raise her children with love, far away from Daniel's anger and broken promises. They would have a life built on kindness, not business empires or family legacies. As she drove into the night, her tears dried, and she made a silent promise to her unborn children. They would know love, strength, and happiness. But they wouldn't know their father, not until he proved he was worthy of being part of their lives. After leaving Daniel, Isla went to a quiet village in California. Her uncle Richard helped her move into a beautiful farmhouse far from nosy neighbors and gossip. Spring was just beginning when Isla learned something surprising. She wasn't having just one baby. She was having 3. The doctor, Dr. Sarah Martinez, smiled kindly and said, "Triplets. All 3 babies are healthy and strong. Would you like to hear their heartbeats?" Isla listened to the sound of her baby's tiny hearts and tears ran down her face. But these tears weren't sad, they were happy tears. She knew she had to protect her babies and give them the best life she could. Uncle Richard became her biggest supporter. He helped fix up the farmhouse and made sure no one could bother her. The villagers who had known Isla's family for years also helped. Maria Lopez, who used to cook for Isla's family, brought warm meals and kind advice. Mr. Chen, the village carpenter, made 3 cribs from strong, beautiful wood. Even the kids in the village helped, keeping an eye out for strangers who might come near. Isla worked hard to prepare for her babies. She turned the spare rooms into a bright, cheerful nursery. She read books about raising triplets and filled the farmhouse with love. The months passed quickly and finally, the day came. It was a warm summer evening when Isla went into labor. Uncle Richard had prepared a special room in the local clinic for her. For 14 hours, she worked through the pain, and finally, at 3:47 a.m., her first baby was born. He cried loudly, letting everyone know he was strong. 2 more babies followed soon after. "You have 2 boys and 1 girl," the doctor said, placing the tiny babies in Isla's arms. They were perfect, with tiny fingers and soft hair. Isla cried happy tears again as she looked at them. One boy had Daniel's dark hair. The girl had her green eyes. They were a mix of both their parents, proof that love, even when broken, could create something beautiful. Isla named them carefully: Elliot Alexander, after her father and uncle; Noah Thomas, after her grandfather; and Lila Rose, after her mother. Life changed after the triplets were born. The farmhouse was filled with baby laughter and love. The villagers helped raise the children, protecting them like their own family. Isla gave her children all the love she once gave Daniel, teaching them to be strong, kind, and happy. 4.5 years later, Daniel came back. He was driving through the village when he saw something strange near the orchard. 3 children playing under the apple trees. One boy was chasing a butterfly. Another was climbing a tree, his face full of determination. The little girl stood out the most. Her smile, her movements, they reminded Daniel of someone he couldn't forget: Isla. Mr. Bevan, the driver, looked worried as he glanced at his employer. Daniel had suddenly gone pale, but before the driver could ask anything, Daniel got out of the car. Something had pulled him toward the children playing nearby, almost as if he were in a dream. An old woman sitting nearby was knitting, but when she saw Daniel, she stood up quickly. She moved to stand between him and the children, her eyes sharp. "Can I help you?" she asked, but her tone made it clear she didn't really want to help. Daniel's voice was rough as he asked, "Those children, who are they?" The woman's face grew hard. "They're Miss Isla's little ones, and you've got no business asking about them." Daniel felt like the world had turned upside down. Miss Isla's little ones. The timing. Their faces, the way his heart seemed to recognize them even before his mind could. It all made sense now. "Triplets," he whispered. He already knew the answer. "Maria Lopez," a small voice called out. "Look what we found." 3 children came running toward them, holding wildflowers in their little hands. They stopped when they saw Daniel, their identical faces filled with curiosity. Daniel's heart ached as he looked at them. They looked so much like him, it felt like another confirmation of what he already knew. "Inside now, my darlings," Maria Lopez said firmly. "Your mama will want you for lunch." Daniel watched as the children walked away. Every step they took hurt his heart even more. The way the boys' feet moved in sync, the girls' delicate steps, how had he not known? How had the world kept such a secret from him? "She was pregnant," Daniel said, his voice heavy. "That Christmas night when Maria Lopez cut him off sharply. "When you broke her heart, when you called her barren and threw away 15 years of marriage. Yes, she was pregnant, with 3 miraculous babies. You didn't deserve to know." Daniel felt the weight of her words. His drunken, cruel accusations of infertility had been aimed at a woman who had been carrying not 1 but 3 of his children. Children who had grown up for over 4 years without their father, while he wasted his life drowning in sadness and alcohol. "I need to see her," he said, running a shaking hand through his hair. "Please, I need to talk to Isla." "Miss Isla doesn't see anyone she doesn't want to see," Maria Lopez replied firmly. "And after what you did, Mr. Bevan, I doubt she'll want to see you." But Daniel didn't give up. He pulled out his phone and started calling everyone he knew, desperate to find a way to reach her. For weeks, he tried and tried, but every time, he was blocked. He learned that Isla had built a quiet, happy life in the village. The people there loved her and protected her fiercely. He also learned about his children. Their names were Alexander, Noah, and Lila. Even their names were perfect. The villagers told stories about how kind, smart, and adventurous the triplets were. Each story made Daniel's heart ache with both joy and sadness. He had missed so much. Daniel moved to a nearby town and spent his days hoping to catch glimpses of his children from a distance. He watched them play in the square, go to school, and laugh with the villagers who treated them like family. He even saw Ela sometimes, more beautiful than ever, her love for their children shining brightly. She had built something precious, something that was untouched by the mistakes of their past. For 6 months, Daniel didn't stop trying to reach her. He wrote letters, but they were sent back unopened. He called, but she never answered. Finally, Isla's uncle, Richard Caldwell, agreed to help. "She'll see you," Uncle Richard said sternly, "but only once. And don't think you can walk back into their lives so easily. You'll have to prove yourself worthy." Daniel nodded, knowing this was his chance. 5 years of regret had made him desperate to fix things. He would do whatever it took. The meeting was set at the community center where Ella taught art classes. When Daniel arrived, the room was empty except for Isla, who stood by the window. She turned to face him, and he felt the weight of all his mistakes in her cold, distant gaze. She wasn't the same woman he had married. She was a mother now, strong, protective, and unwilling to let anyone hurt her children. The silence between them was heavy. Outside, they could hear the laughter of children playing. Their children. Daniel took a step forward, but Isla raised her hand to stop him. "Before you say anything," she said, her voice calm but firm, "know this. I'm only here because Uncle Richard thinks you deserve one chance to explain yourself. One chance, Daniel. Make it count." "They're beautiful," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. "Our children. They're perfect." Isla's eyes flashed. "They're perfect because they've never had to see their father choose alcohol over family," she said sharply. "They've never had to wonder if their father would come home drunk or if he'd waste their future on gambling." Daniel flinched but didn't argue. He had no defense. "When did you find out about the pregnancy?" he asked softly. 2 weeks before that Christmas night," Isla said, her voice tinged with old pain. "I was waiting for the right moment to tell you, but instead you came home drunk and called me barren." The memory hung in the air. Outside, the children's laughter reminded them of everything that had been lost. "I've been sober for 18 months, Daniel said quietly. "I've been going to meetings, working with a sponsor. I'm not the same man who hurt you." Isla studied him carefully. 18 months of sobriety doesn't erase 15 years of broken promises, she said. It doesn't give you the right to walk into their lives and risk breaking their hearts. "Tell me what to do," Daniel pleaded. "Whatever it is, I'll do it. Please give me a chance to be their father." Ela turned to the window, looking out at the village. The sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. "3 conditions," she said finally. "Meet them and we'll talk. Fail and you'll never see them again." Daniel nodded. "Name them." "First," she said, her voice steady, "you will repay me for the land I sold to save you. Its value is $600 million. Every penny must be earned honestly. No shortcuts." "Done," Daniel said without hesitation. "What else?" "Second," she continued, "you will work as a farmer on that same land for 1 week. Manual labor. Sunrise to sunset. No special treatment. You need to understand what I sacrificed." Daniel nodded, his face serious. "And third," Isla said, her voice firm, "you will never drink again. Not 1 sip. I want proof. Meetings, reports, anything I ask for. 1 slip and you're out." Daniel's heart pounded as he listened. These were big tasks, but he was ready to do whatever it took. "The money will take time," he said honestly. "Then take the time," Isla replied. "I waited 9 months for our children. You can wait too." "And the farm work?" he asked. "Will I see them?" "No," Isla said firmly. "This is about proving yourself, not about seeing them." Daniel accepted her conditions. He knew this was his chance to make things right. As she turned to leave, he called out softly, "Their names, they're perfect." Isla paused. "Elliot Alexander for my father and uncle, Noah Thomas for my grandfather and our butler, and Lila Rose for my mother and her garden. They have your last name, even after everything. Friday, I couldn't take that from them. Daniel had a big problem. He had made a lot of mistakes in his life, especially with gambling and drinking, and he hurt his family. He owed a lot of money to someone named Isla. To fix things, he had to do three very hard things: work on a farm for a while, earn $600 million through honest work, and stay away from alcohol for 5 years. At first, Daniel thought it was just about paying back the money, but as time went on, he learned it was about more than that. It was about proving he could change and become a better person. Daniel worked hard on the farm. The farm workers didn't like him at first because of his past, but by the end of the week, they respected him. He did every job, no matter how hard, without complaining. This was just the start of his journey to fix his life. Daniel needed to rebuild a family business called the Bavon Furniture Empire, but this time he wanted to do it the right way, with honesty and care for people and the planet. He sold his fancy house and expensive things and moved into a small apartment. He wanted to save every dollar to help him reach his goal. The first year was very hard. Daniel worked long hours and made big changes to the business. He focused on making furniture in ways that didn't hurt the environment. Slowly, people started to trust the Bavon name again. It became known for being honest and creative. Daniel also joined a group to help him stay sober. He met with other people who were also trying to stop drinking. His sponsor, David Grant, became his friend and helped him stay strong, especially when things felt impossible. Every time Daniel reached a new milestone, like staying sober for a year, he would send a picture of his achievement to Isla through her brother, Uncle Richard. 3 years into his journey, Daniel invented a new way to make furniture that was good for the environment. He turned things like rice straw and coffee grounds into beautiful tables and chairs. This invention earned a lot of money and showed the world that Daniel had really changed. Even though Daniel wasn't allowed to see his kids, Uncle Richard shared updates about them. Daniel learned that Alexander won a science fair, Noah acted in a play, and Lila's painting was shown in an art gallery. Daniel kept a journal where he wrote down everything about his kids. He also had secret pictures of them on his desk to remind him of why he was working so hard. In the 4th year, a big company offered to buy Daniel's business for a lot of money. This would have made it easy to reach his $600 million goal. But Daniel said no. He remembered Isla's rule. The money had to be earned honestly. Selling the company would have felt like cheating. Instead, Daniel kept building the business slowly and carefully, focusing on doing the right thing. Over 5 years, Daniel's company became a leader in making eco-friendly furniture. He treated his workers fairly and made sure they had good pay and safe workplaces. By the end of the 5 years, Daniel had earned the $600 million, stayed sober, and rebuilt his life. On the day Daniel was supposed to go back to the village to show Isla everything he had done, he felt nervous but proud. He had worked so hard to fix his mistakes and become a better person. He packed all the proof of his success in a leather folder and drove to the village. When Daniel got to the village, he noticed something was wrong. There were black ribbons on the shops, and the place was very quiet. His heart started to beat fast. When he found Uncle Richard, he got the news that Isla had died 3 months ago from cancer. She hadn't told Daniel because she wanted him to focus on becoming better, not feel sorry for her. Daniel was heartbroken. He had done everything Isla asked, but now she wasn't there to see it. Uncle Richard gave Daniel a letter from Isla. In the letter, she told Daniel that she had been watching his progress and was proud of him. She told him it was time to forgive himself and focus on being a good father to their children. Daniel visited Isla's grave to say goodbye. Daniel made a big promise. He vowed to honor Isla's memory by being the best dad he could be. He wanted to guide their children with all the lessons he learned about being kind and good. He also wanted to make sure Isla's forgiveness was never forgotten. 10 years after Illa passed away, the Morrison Bevan family's big house was no longer just a fancy mansion. It had become a warm and happy home. The sun shined through the windows one beautiful spring morning. The walls were decorated with family photos, some new, some old, so that Isla's memory could always stay alive in every room. Daniel stood in his study, fixing his tie. He was 48 years old now, and his hair was turning gray at the edges. Each gray strand showed the years he had spent trying to become a better person. The study used to be filled with awards from his work, but now it was filled with his children's trophies and Isla's photos. "Dad!" Alexander called from the doorway. He was 15 years old and almost as tall as Daniel. Alexander had Isla's green eyes and Daniel's strong jawline. Noah is still fixing his hair, and Lila can't pick which painting to show. Daniel smiled, recognizing Isla's practical nature in Alexander. Tell your brother his hair looks great, and remind your sister that all her paintings are beautiful. It was a very special day. 10 years ago, Daniel had started the Isla Caldwell Memorial Foundation to honor Isla. The foundation helped students who didn't have much money to go to school. It also supported farmers around the world to grow food in better ways. Every year, the family celebrated the foundation and Isla's memory together. Suddenly, Noah ran into the study. His tie was crooked, but his smile was big. "Uncle Richard is here, and guess what? He found Mom's old diary from when she was our age." Lila followed him. Her dress was elegant, but her hands were covered in paint. "Dad, look at this," she said, holding a leather journal. "It's filled with her drawings. I didn't know Mom could draw." Daniel hugged his children, feeling grateful. He had almost lost this joy, but now his family was stronger than ever. The triplets were amazing teenagers, each with their own talents and dreams. They reminded him of Isla and also of himself. Alexander, the oldest, was very smart. He loved farming and was already working on ways to help farmers grow food using new technology. He had even won a big science award. Noah, with his kind heart, was like a bridge between people. He started a group at school to help other kids with family problems. Lila, the artist, painted pictures that showed the beauty in life. She loved painting about their family and stories of forgiveness, just like Isla taught them. Before they left for the foundation event, Daniel gathered his kids around Isla's favorite chair. "There's something special I want to show you," he said. He opened a wooden box. Inside were letters written by Isla. "She wrote these for all your big moments in life," Daniel said, his voice soft. "She wanted to be part of your lives, even if she couldn't be here." The kids opened the letters and read Isla's words of love and wisdom. There were letters for their birthdays, graduations, first loves, and even their future weddings. Isla had thought of everything. "She knew," Lila whispered, holding a letter close to her heart. "She knew she wouldn't be here, so she found a way to stay with us." Daniel nodded, his eyes wet with tears. "Your mom was the strongest person I ever knew. She taught me that real love isn't about big gifts or easy promises. It's about choosing every day to be better, do better, and love better." At the foundation ceremony that afternoon, the great hall was filled with happy people. There were students who got scholarships, farmers who learned new ways to grow food, and community members who were inspired by Isla's legacy. Alexander shared the latest farming projects with confidence, just like his mom had done during her business presentations. Noah introduced the new scholarship students, making everyone feel special. Lila showed her painting series called Moments with Mom. Her artwork captured Isla's spirit and made many people cry happy tears. When Daniel spoke, he looked at the crowd with gratitude. 10 years ago, I learned that sometimes we don't get a second chance to fix our mistakes. But Isla taught me that love, true, powerful love, can make a difference even after we're gone. He pointed to his children, who stood tall and proud. "These amazing kids are proof that love can heal, forgiveness can mend, and a legacy isn't about money or power. It's about the lives we touch and the good we inspire. A soft breeze came through the open window, carrying the smell of roses, Hila's favorite flower. It felt like she was there, smiling at the family she loved so much. That evening, after the event, the family sat in their garden. The sunset painted the sky in purple and gold, just like it had on that Christmas night long ago. But this time the air was full of love, hope, and healing. Daniel watched his children laugh and share stories. Each of them carried a piece of Isla in their hearts while walking their own paths in life. The journey had been hard, but in the end, Daniel found something precious, a family built on love, understanding, and forgiveness. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Daniel whispered a quiet thank you to Isla. Her legacy wasn't just in the foundation or the kids. It was in the lesson she taught them all, that love can transform, heal, and create something beautiful, even from pain. The Morrison Bevon family would continue, guided by the wisdom of the past and the promise of the future. And Daniel knew deep down that Isla was proud of them all. Thank you for watching. If you like this story and want to see more, please subscribe to our channel. That way, you won't miss any new videos. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and share what you think in the comments. We love hearing your thoughts. Also, don't forget to check out the other videos on our channel. We'll see you in the next story.